Compounding is one of those things that sounds amazing when people explain it. You hear phrases like, your money makes money, and then that money makes more money. It almost feels like a magic trick. But when you actually try it in real life, it often feels slow, boring, and almost invisible in the beginning. That's why many people give up on it too early. They expect quick results, but compounding doesn't work that way. It has its own rhythm, and the real growth only shows up much later. To understand why compounding feels so slow at first, we need to break down how it actually works, what it looks like in the early years, and why patience is the most important ingredient in making it work for you. When you first start saving and investing, the numbers feel small. Let's say you put in $1,000 and earn 10% in a year. At the end of the year, you have $1,100. That means you earned $100 from compounding. It's good, but it doesn't feel life-changing. $100 isn't going to make you feel like your financial life has transformed. The next year, you don't just earn on the $1,000 you invested, you also earn on the extra $100. So now your money grows to... That means the growth was $110 instead of $100. The numbers are improving, but again, it feels slow. At this stage, many people look at their accounts and wonder if it's even worth it. The truth is, compounding is designed to reward those who stay consistent for long periods. In the first few years, the growth comes mostly from your contributions. You're adding new money every month or every year, and that's what makes the account grow. The compounding effect is there, but it's small because your starting balance is small. For compounding to feel powerful, you need a big enough base for the growth to look meaningful. This is why it often looks like nothing is happening in the early stages. Think of compounding like planting a tree. When you first put a seed in the ground, you water it and care for it, but for weeks or months, nothing much seems to be happening. You might see a tiny sprout, but it looks fragile and small. But our brains are impatient, and we want to see results now, not 10 or 20 years from now. For example, if you invest $10,000 at 10% annual growth, after the first year, you'll have $11,000. That's only $1,000 more. After 10 years, you'll have about $25,000, which is more than double your money. But after 20 years, that same $10,000 becomes $67,000. After 30 years, it's $174,000. And after 40 years, it's over $450,000. Notice how the biggest jumps don't happen until the later years. The first few years look slow, but if you hang on, the growth becomes massive. The problem is that most people never make it to the later years because they quit too soon. Another way to see why compounding feels slow is to look at how much of your final wealth actually comes from the early years. Using the same $10,000 example, in the first 10 years you earned about $15,000 in growth. But in the last 10 years of that 40-year period, your money grew from $174,000 to $450,000. That's over $276,000 in just 10 years. Which is way more than the total growth in the first 30 years combined. That's the secret of compounding. It rewards patience, not speed. This is also why compounding works better for people who already have large amounts of money. If you already have $1 million invested and you earn 10%, that's $100,000 in just 1 year. That's a huge return, and it feels powerful because the base amount is so big. But when you only have $1,000 invested, a 10% return is just $100. It's the same percentage, but the result feels completely different. This is why wealthier people seem to get richer faster. They're playing with larger amounts of money, so compounding looks like it's working harder for them. In reality, it's the same principle, but they're further along the curve. So what does this mean for someone just starting out? It means you can't judge the power of compounding by looking at your first few years. The growth will feel slow, and you might think it's not worth the effort, but the only way to unlock its true power is to stay the course and keep adding money. The more you contribute in the early years, the bigger your base will be later on, and the faster the growth will feel. Patience and consistency are the keys. Another thing that makes compounding feel slow is life itself. In the early years of your career, you might not have much money to invest. Most of your income goes toward rent, food, bills, and maybe student loans. So the amounts you're putting aside for investing might be small. That's normal. But those small amounts, if invested consistently, can grow into something significant over time. Even if you can only put aside $100 a month over 30 or 40 years, that can turn into hundreds of thousands of dollars. But in year one, it just looks like $1,200 saved, and maybe $1,250 after growth. It feels too small to matter, and that's why so many people give up. The truth is, compounding is a game of time. The earlier you start, the less money you need to put in to reach a big number later. If you start at 20 years old and invest regularly, even small amounts, you give your money decades to grow. If you wait until 40 or 50 to start, you'll need to put in much larger amounts to reach the same result, because you missed out on the slow but crucial early years. The irony is that the earlier years feel the least rewarding, but they are the most important because they give compounding the runway it needs to explode later. One of the best ways to stay motivated during the slow phase of compounding is to track progress in percentages rather than just in dollars. If your money grew by 10%, that's worth celebrating, even if the actual dollar amount looks small. Over time, that same percentage will apply to larger sums, and the dollar amounts will look much bigger. Shifting your perspective in this way helps you see the consistency of compounding rather than getting discouraged by small early numbers. Another useful way to keep yourself engaged is to set milestones that are not only about the final big number, but also about smaller wins along the way. For example, celebrate when your money doubles for the first time, even if it's only from $500 to $1,000. That might not sound huge, but it shows the process is working. The next doubling will be from $1,000 to $2,000, then from $2,000 to $4,000, and eventually from $100,000 to $200,000. Each doubling takes you further, and the time it takes becomes shorter once the numbers are larger. Recognizing these small checkpoints makes the journey less frustrating and gives you reasons to stay consistent. You can also stay motivated by comparing your progress not only against what you have, but against what you would have if you hadn't started at all. For example, if you've been investing for 5 years and your account is at $7,000 instead of $5,000, it might not feel like much, but compared to doing nothing and having zero, it's a huge difference. This kind of comparison reminds you that slow growth is still better than no growth. Another perspective that helps is to think about your contributions as bricks. Each dollar you put in is like laying down a brick in the foundation of a house. At first, it just looks like a small pile of bricks. But keep stacking them week after week, year after year, and eventually you'll look back and realize you've built an entire house. It's not the single brick that makes the difference. It's the consistency of adding more over time. That's how compounding works. The magic is not in one year, but in the habit of showing up every year. It's also helpful to remember that compounding is not just about money. The same principle applies to skills, health, relationships, and habits. When you start learning something new, your progress feels slow. You spend hours practicing and only improve a little. But if you stick with it for years, the improvements stack on each other, and suddenly you're at a level you never imagined. The early stages feel slow in every area of life because that's how compounding works. It hides its rewards until later. The reason compounding feels slow at first is not because it doesn't work, but because it works in a way that most people are not used to. We want fast results. We want big changes now, but compounding doesn't bend to our impatience. It's a long game and it requires faith in the process. If you can accept that the early years are going to feel uneventful, you can set yourself up for the big rewards that come later. In the end, compounding teaches us one of the most important lessons about wealth: patience. It's not about what happens in 1 year or even 5 years. It's about what happens over decades. The slow growth in the beginning is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that the system is working exactly as it should. If you stay the course, keep contributing, and give it time, compounding will eventually shift from feeling slow to feeling unstoppable. That's when you realize that the boring early years were worth it.